Hello, I've been at the FIPP World Congress in Cascais again, and the voices you hear in this special Media Voices podcast episode were recorded at the event. But before we head off to the beautiful Portuguese Riviera, I need to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Disrupt. Disrupt powers the FIPP World Media Congress and is the organiser and host of Media Makers Meet, MX3. That's an event dedicated to specialist media, scheduled for Berlin the 7th and 8th of February 2024. Disrupt was founded late in 2021 by Cobus Hale and John Shafley, formerly of FIPP. The company produces specialist in-depth reports as well as events. We'll hear a little bit more later about what Disrupt are up to from John. Before we get going, please forgive the audio quality in some places in this episode. Most of it was recorded in a big, busy auditorium, in corridors and corners, and in rooms packed with delegates. So, the sense at Cascais this year, despite a general acknowledgement that times are undoubtedly tough, was a sense that there are still very real opportunities for world media. Yulia Boyle, FIPP Chair and Head of International Media at National Geographic, set the scene for 400 delegates in the room. She opened by introducing a special delegation to the Congress from Ukraine and highlighting a Ukrainian government initiative to bring a host of government services into a single app, a digital innovation rolled out under the most difficult circumstances imaginable.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here in person. I welcome all our 43 countries here today. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today revolves around our continuous transformation in media. And speaking about transformation and disruption, allow me to start with a story. About 2 weeks ago, I attended an event in Washington, D.C., where I witnessed a tremendous digital transformation. It was a true digital revolution, I think, unfolding in a country that is being disrupted by a harrowing war. The presentation was by the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine and the Minister of Digital Transformation of Ukraine, Mikhailo Fedorov. The event was unveiling of the government-created app, an app that is a one-stop shop for over 120 services that typically you would get only in standing in lines and getting through a huge bureaucracy. Today, in Ukraine, in a country that is fighting for its survival and nationhood, when you have a baby, you can register the baby and get a birth certificate from one app. You can register your small business. You can get your construction permit. Today, 20 million Ukrainians, about 50% of the population, is trusting and using the app. So why am I telling you this story? Because I think it demonstrates very well that even amidst a most harrowing disruption that a country can have or people can have, innovation is still possible, and it lays foundation for the future despite what's happening today. This is why really FIPP is putting so much muscle behind diversity and inclusion, because innovation is one thing, but inclusivity is actually driving innovation, and innovation comes from the opportunities that we get from around the world. And I think FT put it very succinctly recently that today we live in an era of reverse innovation, which means that in 20th century, the Western companies thought that innovation starts in the West and then it's bestowed to the developing countries. But that assumption was challenged when M-Pesa, one of the first mobile banking apps, was created in Kenya and then was copied elsewhere around the world. And since then, innovation is coming everywhere. That is why we're putting so much behind inclusion in FIPP in order to bring those practices here to us. AI is, of course, already appending our business models by keeping away the traffic from our websites and raising big concerns about intellectual property infringement, perpetuation of historic biases, and false information. The speed of it is unprecedented. It took Spotify 150 days to get to 1 million users. It took Instagram 75 and GPT only 5 days. We can tremendously improve our productivity by using some of the models that can help us in analysis and discovery of topics for our stories. But the best stories, of course, as we know, will be created by talent and creators like you.
As you can imagine, conference speakers returned again and again to AI, both as a threat and an opportunity. But Andrei Jovchenko, CEO of FIPP World Media in Ukraine, spoke about a more direct existential threat and media resilience, specifically his staff's fight to get magazines and newspapers to readers in the middle of a war.
My name is Andrei Jovchenko. I'm CEO and owner of World Media in Ukraine. With our print and digital products, we reach 4 million readers monthly. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you some information on how we are now living and working in Ukraine after 470 days of full-scale Russian aggression. When I was preparing my presentation, I had to think really hard about what I would say and what I would not tell you today. And finally, I decided not to turn on the sound of air siren that we Ukrainians hear every single day. Because Harvard scientists have proven that the post-traumatic stress has an irreversible effect on the brain. And secondly, since the beginning of the war, our Ukrainian brains have heard this horrible sound for more than 25,000 times. I also decided not to talk about my personal experience of surviving and parting with my family that was forced to leave to another country. Similarly to 5 million Ukrainians now in Europe and 7 million Ukrainian people who have left their homes and remain in Ukraine with the status of internally displaced persons. Instead, I decided just to say thank you. Thank you everyone who has helped and opened their hearts and homes to Ukraine. I definitely do want to share with you some personal stories about business survival as well as national media sustainability trends in Ukraine. During the very first days of the full-scale invasion, our warehouse was hit by Russian artillery. Unfortunately, 2 of my colleagues, the warehouse workers, were blocked in there and had to hide and survive there, having no possibility to run away. Luckily, they survived, and now our warehouse is working again. We restarted the deliveries of magazines to the newsstands or the point of sale again in May 2022. And I'm really proud that World Media was the first publisher in Ukraine to restart printing magazines after February 24th. So I'm also here as a representative of the Ukrainian Media Business Association, which united 600 publishing brands from all the regions of the country, reaching more than 20 million Ukrainians. One case study of another local media brand and demonstrate an ordinary day in the life of one local newspaper in Kharkiv region, eastern Ukraine. In the morning they are coming to their office or what was left of it. In the afternoon they received the emergency assistance from our association, a generator which arrived right during the air raid signal. In the evening, they turned on the generator because the air attack damaged the local power grid. At the night, they handed over the edition to the printer, working from a generator and power banks. And this kind of action movie is just one case of hundreds happening in the Ukraine every single day. The main challenges of Ukrainian media entities are lack of cash, missing assets because they are destroyed or they are on the occupied territories, and the missing knowledge on how to create a profitable digital business. For the knowledge, we have organized seminars where about 100 publishers were attending, where the well-known media expert present here, the Juan Senior, and some colleagues from Financial Times have shared with us their valuable knowledge in ideas on how to innovate and restructure business in times of crisis have been essential for all publishers, and not only in Ukraine, of course. Thanks to those measures, we can say that more or less 300 journalist jobs have been saved, and last but not least, 20 million Ukrainians have been able to access a journalistic product. So, from this stage in Cascais, I would like to thank all the generous donors who have supported us in these difficult times.
Just before Andrei spoke, I managed to catch up with another member of the Ukrainian delegation. She told me about the enormous changes her team had to make to keep working and the very personal sacrifice made by one of her colleagues.
My name is Anastasia Rava. I'm editor-in-chief in Espresso TV channel, Ukrainian media outlet, which included not only TV channel, we also have a website, we also have a very successful YouTube channel with 2 million subscribers.
So how has your job changed? That must have changed incredibly over the last 18 months or so.
Of course, we have a lot of changes. When was started, we had our office in Kyiv almost for 10 years, Espresso TV, and we also had small studio in Lviv. We know that this fall was started, and we have Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and we decided very quickly to relocate all our staff in Lviv, because Lviv is more safety city than Kyiv, for example, but not safety too much, of course, because we don't have any safe places in Ukraine. It's not possible to feel safe in different cities, and for 1 year we live in another city and try to talk to world, to Ukrainians, how we survive and how about our armed forces, because we honor it about them. They really do a huge job. My colleague, video director of Espresso TV, Vasil Yaborsky, when the full scale was started, he joined like a volunteer to armed forces of Ukraine and became a soldier, and he was killed by Russian in autumn 2022. And it's very important to me, to my colleagues, which everyone knows about him, about his story.
In the face of stories like those we heard from Ukraine, worrying about the rise of AI can seem inconsequential. But of course, at a media conference, it was on everyone's mind. And in presenting this year's edition of his annual Media Innovations Report, Juan Senior zeroed in almost immediately on AI.
So once again, we're here with the book. It's been over a decade presenting this book, and it's been fascinating to indeed engage with all of you this year in particular in getting our heads around what it's indeed a watershed year. It's a massively transformative year. We almost decided to do half the book about AI. We're firm believers that print is eternal, it will never die, and great examples of how print is indeed growing in many markets, surprisingly, but very much based on fandom and very much based on hobbies. People still like and really will pay and a premium price for that experience if it's unique, if it's tailored, if it's niche. But as I said, we almost made the book monothematic this year, because generative AI is the most transformative innovation we all face. And look, it's not about digital transformation. It's about the transformation of digital. It is that deep. It's time for AI. It's time for AI media first company. And I know we've heard, digital first, and then it was mobile first, and then social first, what have you. But this is a transformation of digital. So you really need to begin to rethink of your business in terms of the profound impact that this is going to have on all of us here, starting now. And we do not want to miss this train. For many of you, maybe the last train in digital. We missed the social train. We missed the mobile train. Some people missed the search train. Let's not miss this train. And this is the innovation to get your head around. We need to understand AI. Right now, 23, understand it. Don't fight it.
Reflecting the straitened times we live in, AI was not the only disruptive force on the agenda. Advice on how to cope with tough economic conditions featured heavily, and what better place than Argentina to get some encouragement for coping with a highly volatile business environment.
So I'm Agustino Fontevecchia, Digital Director for Editorial Perfil, which is one of the largest publishers in Argentina and Brazil. We went from being a print magazine company that has a newspaper less than 10 years ago. Today, we are a multimedia organization with print magazines, print newspaper, a large digital operation with day-to-day newspaper that competes with the largest newspapers in Argentina in terms of digital websites, and also we've launched several broadcast TV channels and the radio. So we are trying to occupy as many spaces as we can.
Okay, but you're expanding in a set of economic conditions that's maybe not what we would consider to be ideal. Is that right?
No, absolutely. I mean, in the past 8 years, inflation has gone from 30 to 120% on an annual basis. The peso-dollar exchange rate went from 9 to 500. Of course, the purchasing power of the people is going down. Argentina has at least one decade, the past decade has been just constant crisis, with bouts of aggressive crisis and bouts of relative calm. And it's a country where there's no access to credit. So either you decide to look for opportunity by brute force, or you can decide to, become a smaller and smaller and smaller organization if you want to prioritize profits. So we stopped prioritizing profits. We just decided, okay, screw it, we got to go for everything, because if we don't do this, we're going to become less relevant, and eventually we're going to have to shut down because the operation won't make sense. So having that mission of saying, no, we're going to remain relevant as not only as a journalistic powerhouse, but as a company. And so that forced us out of our comfort zone. It's not great business, if you will, if you just look at the bottom line. We think it might be in the future, but we think it's the only way to get to that future. So that's where we're going.
I guess one of the problems in the environment you're describing is, even if you're profitable, your profits could be disappearing because of nothing that you've done, just because of economic circumstances.
Right. It's economic circumstance, and it's the eternal crisis of our industry, right? So, there are changing habits that are, people are not consuming media in the same way as before. Other actors that are, taking a lot of the ad spend out there. A lot of people, the subscriptions where they used to pay maybe magazines, maybe newspapers. Now, you compete with Netflix and with Spotify. So at that endemic crisis to our industry, it's been going on for 25 years, at least 30 years, to the set of situation, the circumstances of Argentina. Anybody in their sane mind would say it doesn't make sense to do business in Argentina. So why do we do it? Well, we're from there. So it's where, for us, it makes sense to be there. And, many times it might be difficult to explain to an outside investor, and that's why they don't invest. So you have to figure out a way. I mean, at the same time, I was hearing a panel here before on the CEO of Burda, Ukraine. You know, why would you continue publishing magazines in Ukraine? Well, they're doing it and they're pushing forward. And I think, of course, that's a much more complex circumstance than the one we're living, where it's just economic crisis. But I think there's something about willpower behind it all.
So inflation in the UK at the moment is running about 10%, and everyone is panicking and, you know, really sees a problem. And it's hard for people. Coming from where you're coming from, what advice would you give publishers?
I think that it's key that you have to be flexible and creative in everything that you're doing. So for us, this situation I described before has put us in conditions in which sometimes we don't have enough money to either pay salaries, pay providers, pay someone else. And in Argentina in general, at certain moments, the payments chain breaks down. So everybody's not having enough money. So, for example, you have to have the flexibility to say, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with my employees getting pissed off? How am I going to deal with the providers not giving me the supplies that I need? And you will find a way. You will find a way. So you have to be flexible. And then the other thing that I think is key is that you need to be resilient and you need to move fast. 10% for an economy that's used to 2% is a lot. You know, 120% for us, it's a lot, but this has been in crescendo over the past several years. So we're kind of used to it. Doesn't make it all right. But I would say that you have to keep your eye on the ball, absolute focus, but be flexible. Forget the textbooks.
It's easy to get the impression that only the biggest players were at the FIPP Congress, but in among the media multinationals, there were also some very interesting independent publishers.
My name is Catalina Morales. I am one of the founder editors of the Polyglot magazine. Polyglot magazine is a literary magazine. We have published more than 55 languages, and we're focused on literally being a platform for writers, emerging writers and established writers that write in different languages that are not English and French, that are pretty much the ones that are mainstream. We publish poetry, short stories, prose, essays, just giving an avenue to other writers to be able to publish their work.
In total, you've published 55 different languages.
Yes, wow. Including indigenous languages.
So tell me some of those languages.
Oh my God, everything. We have published Spanish, Tagalog, Hindi, everything. Like, there are some of them that I can't even pronounce because they're indigenous. So one of our previous issues, we actually last year had 2 issues on a row focused on indigenous languages.
I'm guessing you don't speak 55 languages. How do you deal with those different languages?
Well, we are a quite diverse board of editors, so between all of us, I think that we speak around 12 languages, so we're able to kind of curate the content. But the beauty of these kind of articles or the things that we publish is that it's art, right? So it's very subjective to say if it's good or not. And sometimes we just go with being able to provide a platform to a very specific language that has never been published in any other medium because it's not represented.
So who are your readers?
Our readers are polyglots, people who speak and read more than one language, and usually are writers and readers, the ones that read us.
How do you find them?
To be honest, we have been found by them. When we launched the first edition, we never expected that we were going to have such a response. And we just put the word out, and it was just literally word of mouth that we were launching this magazine, and suddenly we have more than what we were expecting.
You're in print,
yes,
but you also have social media and website and the whole digital thing?
Yes, we have the whole thing. We actually publish on demand, so we are digital, and you can get, you buy it, then you can get it printed. But we also have social media. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and you can visit us on our website, thepolyglotmagazine.com. One of the things for literary magazines is to actually find the middle point of being profitable so we can sustain our magazine throughout time. We are understanding how we can implement passion and business at the same time that is needed for sustainability. So, and the relationship. But I think the most important thing, at least for this Congress in specific, is that the amount of distributors that are open to carry us. And right now, I'm very happy to say that we're going to be available in 17 countries, thanks to a deal that we closed with a distributor. Literary magazines have to come to this kind of Congress. We don't do this. I have only found one other literary magazine. So we need to come.
Whether it's literary magazines or other niche titles, small publishers definitely added to the mix at this year's Congress. And in giving me his thoughts on the 2 days, Flashes and Flames Colin Morrison spotlighted the lessons that can be learned from niche publishers and the communities that they build.
If you measure it by how many times this or that word or sentence has been mentioned, then you'd have to say AI was the big thing, because AI is being talked about so readily by almost everyone in the whole of the world. And there's a lot of angst about it and not much knowledge. People are worried about something they don't know much about, and I don't know much about it either. But I think if you go past that, there are certainly all kinds of fears about the economy and, you know, perhaps about climate change as it might affect businesses and things like that. But there's a very real sense in which FIPP, which started after all as a magazine publishers conference, is now a proper media conference with all kinds of people, and we all use the word media, but it's a very broad term and there's a very diverse group of people, and yet somehow this conference, 450 or something people, manages to be a real group and a real community of people who have some shared interests, but a lot of interest in these broad subjects. And I think in a way that helps for me define, you know, where the promise of media really is. I think in communities that you can define, you can put your arms around, you can get to know. It's the opposite, you might say, from mass market. But I think that's where the best future of media is, particularly for people who came from newspapers and magazines like many of these did. One of the words, I guess, reflecting what you're talking about is niche. There was a lot of talk about niche product. Yes, I feel strongly that that does describe an attractive kind of strategy. Of course, there are niches and niches, and some people would describe as niche something with a few 100,000 people in a town. But I think that's right. I mean, if you take my little Flashes and Flames, you know, I'm catering for a very narrow niche of people, and most of the people who subscribe, even though they're paying me real money, you know, I do know. And it's knowing an audience as best you can that helps you manage the community and helps you really not only get the most out of it, but give the most to it. If you define niche as being that, measurable, touchable, reachable, then I think that's exactly where it should be. And it isn't that you can't make money if you're Google or if you're running YouTube or Facebook or whatever, because we know those people make a lot of money, but that's not media as we define it, and it's not what people who call themselves publishers would be any good at doing. The other thing I thought was interesting, one of the questions you were asked at the end was about revenue diversification. And is it a danger that you have too many revenue streams? It's easy to feel, whatever company, whether you're in media or anything else, it's easy to feel that loads of different revenue streams offer you some security when one thing's up, another's down, and you get loads of ways of earning money, and somehow that's economic stability. And I'm sure there are companies that would demonstrate that very well to us. However, it's very difficult to manage like that. You can be lucky and have 6 revenue streams, 4 of which you don't know anything about, and you just answer the phone and take the money. Life isn't often like that. And you have to start from the point of view of having a single driven purpose for what you're doing and how you're going to fund it and how you're going to run it. And, you know, that might be a subscription sort of community, or it might be a free publication or a free service of some kind funded by advertising. But I think you've got to start from that point, even if you then have ancillary and other revenue sources. If you don't do that, I think you run the risk of making the mistakes that still print, magazine and newspaper publishers don't own up to in the sort of immediate period around the arrival of the internet, which is that advertising can become so good and so easy and so plentiful that they forgot about readers. They didn't care much. They had as many fringe readers as you could find because that gave you more ads money. You didn't really ask readers for much money for copy sales very often because you didn't need to. And it goes on from there. And of course, and then you say, well, probably a lot of magazines and newspapers didn't care much whether readers had the content they wanted. and it certainly didn't affect the profits much. And then the shit hits the fan with the internet, and it all comes home. And of course, there's the question of timing, because it was very good and successful at one point, and then it wasn't. But I think if you want long-term success, you've got to be driven by a single thing. And for most people, that will be the readers, users, or viewers. And life is healthier, probably more satisfying, but steadier if you do that.
To round out this episode, I spoke with Disrupt's John Shafley and asked him how FIPP's second Congress in Portugal had gone.
It's been really fabulous, and the atmosphere has been excellent. I think last year was it was a bit of a relief. We were coming out of COVID, nobody'd seen everybody, so somebody described it yesterday as this is much more of a sort of business event with some fun. I think the final count's 427 in terms of delegate numbers, 43 countries. About 40% is MD, founder, business owner, top execs, and then split decision makers across editorial, content, tech and marketing, really. So it's a really, really good split of people, a really good mix of people. And I think that's what adds to the event and conversations. Everybody's been very complimentary about the content and how it's been structured as well, so that hopefully it's almost impossible, but we've tried to structure it so there aren't two things on the same subject on two different stages at the same time, so people can do it. But of course, everything goes into the video library, so anyone that's a paid delegate gets access to that video library, and anybody else can purchase one-off or multiple sessions. So nothing needs to get missed. Obviously, this is now operated and powered, as it says in the marketing, by Disrupt, and we operate this on behalf of FIPP. And with FIPP, I think there was a sort of there was a need to move it around the world to represent the global audience, which is completely understandable and fair enough. I think for us, and also moving it to an annual model, because this is the first time it's run 2 years back to back. Obviously, it was meant to do that in 2020. We all know what happened. I think for us, it makes sense to come back to the same place. We've got on with the suppliers, we know the place. And actually, somebody said to me yesterday, it was so nice to land. I know it's so nice to come back. I know which bars I'm going to. I know I'm having dinner. I know which hotel I want to stay at. I know where I'm going to go at the weekend. So that continuity thing's really good.
And in the final minutes of the FIPP 2023 Congress, I couldn't resist the opportunity to ask John what was next.
Oh, please give me a break. Let me have a think about it for a minute. Next firm event is MX3, and MX3 is Disrupt's key brand, and that's Media Makers Meet. We ran our first event in Berlin last October, which was incredibly successful. Very different format. It was a very different sort of vibe, and we want to continue with that. The tentative dates for that are the 7th and 8th of February next year. We're going to go back to Berlin again. We were thinking of Copenhagen and various other places, but we have the lovely Bastion on the ground in Berlin, which helps us no end. It has a slightly different or more focused approach, and it sort of pulls together that specialist sector. We had people from 23 different countries and brought together different sort of communities and cultures, and it was just really great to see people in that specialist and vertical sector. And we've got some pretty cool venues that we're considering. I think we've settled on one, but there's some. It's just a great city, and just like Cascais, everybody loves Berlin. I mean, who doesn't like a few days in Berlin? Some great content and some great things in the evening. We went to a food hall and stuff. So it's a really super brand for us, and delivers a solution for its audience as well.
And that's it from me at FIPP's World Congress 2023. A huge thank you to Disrupt for sponsoring this episode. I hope I'll see you in Berlin. Maybe need to bring a slightly different wardrobe for Berlin in February. But until then, actually until next week on Media Voices, take care.